Hey there, welcome to another episode of Mike's Collection. I'm Mike, and I just want to give you a little update on how the channel's been going. So I started this YouTube channel here. It was about 7.5 months ago. It was February 15th when I posted my first video. And I now have 49 videos up, and I have 170 subscribers, which, again, I don't know if that's good or not, but it seems all right, because I'm sure about maybe 20 of those are my friends. If I was able to get 150, strangers to tune in and actually hit the subscribe button, I think that's pretty great. Considering I've only been at this for a little while, and I am just a middle-aged dude talking about toys. So thank you to everybody who has subscribed or who has been watching. And if you are watching and you're not subscribed, I appreciate it if you do. Out of those 49 videos, I am up to, as of right now, 18,900 views between all the videos combined. Again, I don't know if that's good or not. Some of the channels that I go to, they have hundreds of thousands of subscribers and thousands and thousands of views. To be at almost 19,000 views, spread over 49 videos, seems pretty good to me. Now, I'll be honest, I have one video where I reviewed the Pacific Rim figures, and that video is at 11,000 views. I'm not really sure why. Maybe there's just not that many Pacific Rim videos out there, but that one has by far my most views. And then I also did a video where I reviewed all the different Hellboy figures in my collection, and that one there is up to 1.5 thousand. So those two make up the bulk of it, but then the other 6.5 thousand is spread out over the other 47 videos. Some of them only have 20 views, some of them have like 200. It varies. So I'm still figuring out, I guess, a kind of a focus for this channel. But so far, so good. And I appreciate you guys that have been sticking with me while I kind of figure it out. So with 49 videos behind me, that means that this is episode 50, which feels special for some reason. Maybe it's because I grew up reading comic books, and comic books always made a big deal about every anniversary issue, which seemed to be every 25 issues. So, special 25th issue, special 50th issue, 75th, 100th. And when they have one of these anniversary issues, they give you a hologram cover and charge you double the price. And so I felt I should do something special for my 50th episode, which is partly why it's been a little longer for me to get to this video. Generally, I try and post every week, and it's probably been almost 2 weeks since I posted last. It's because I've been trying to think of what I could do for my 50th video that would make it kind of stand out from the pack. Because if you're a regular viewer, you would know generally I just review whatever toys I bought in the past week, and maybe talk a little bit about movies I've seen and some other pop culture stuff. So I have seen some movies, and I have bought some toys since I talked to you guys last, but I'll probably save that for my next video. Like I said, I wanted this one to be something a little different. I have had a couple of guests on in the past, just friends that come on and hang out with me, so I thought about maybe trying to bring a friend on for this, but I really couldn't think of who I would bring and what we would talk about. I considered maybe doing some sort of list, the best G.I. Joes or best Transformers in my collection or something, but I've done a few of those kind of list videos as well, so that didn't really seem special or unique either. So I was racking my brain about what I could do for this episode, and eventually I landed on not just celebrating my toy collection, but if you guys will indulge me a little bit, I'm going to use this episode to celebrate the most important person in my life, and that is my wife, Vanessa. So what I'm going to cover in this episode is all the action figures that she's bought me, everything she's contributed to Mike's collection since we met, which would be 9 years ago this month. So what I'm going to show you is maybe not everything she's gotten me, but it's at the very least the probably the biggest, most important ones the Christmases and the birthdays and stuff. Every now and again, she just brings me home something as a surprise and stuff, and I might have missed some of those here. So I grabbed everything that I could recall that she's got me for the big events, and there's some pretty cool stuff here. So, we're going to go through all that. But before I get into showing you all the action figures, I'll just give you a little bit of history on us, if you don't mind. So, I met Vanessa on a dating website called Plenty of Fish. And we've been talking back and forth for a little while, and then we had our first actual date on October 30th, 2010. And we didn't spend a lot of time together. We went out and had a beer, so however long that took, maybe like a half hour or something. But I remember it being October 30th. I was going to a Halloween party that night at my friend Miguel's house, and I was going as Cobra Commander. I had just bought this costume online, and I was kind of excited to wear the full chrome faceplate and everything. And I remember telling her that I was going to this Halloween party dressed as Cobra Commander, and she had no idea what a Cobra Commander was, or even what a G.I. Joe was. I don't think she had any idea that there were adult toy collectors. This stuff was all pretty new to her, so I think she was a little shocked the first time she came over to my apartment a few dates later, because at the time I was living in a bachelor apartment, and it looked a lot like this room here. There was a bed and a couch and TV and stuff, but the walls were just covered in this stuff, which can be a little overwhelming, I suppose. But she stuck with me, and so it's been, like I said, 9 years this month. We bought this house together 3 years ago, and a couple months later we got our little dog Casey, who you might have met in a prior video. And and then we just got married this past May.
We're doing this one for all the ladies. H-Town boys. Kicking it with my boy Luke. For the 9-3, you know what I'm saying? Cause we will be knocking the boots. G.I. Shazam Dino.
So without further ado, let's take a look at some of the cool stuff that Vanessa has added to Mike's collection over the years. So we'll start with a couple odds and ends here. So first up here, this is a Superman figure that she bought me for Christmas a few years ago. Now this figure here, he might look kind of odd to you, not how you typically expect Superman to look, but he is based off of a specific artist's style of artwork. So this is based off of Jay Lee's artwork, who did a run of the Batman and Superman comic book. And I'm a big fan of Jay Lee's really stylistic art. And even though I have a couple of really cool, kind of more traditional Superman figures, when I saw that this one was coming out, I was like, I really need to get this one too, because it's just so unique looking. I love all the weird lines about him. Like, he looks kind of like sketched, the way Jay Lee kind of draws. It's not a very clean style. Like, look at this cape. It's so crumpled up looking. I just think it's great. I love this figure. It really captures the artist's work. And so that was a very cool Christmas present from Vanessa. This guy here, this is a Funko Pop. This is the devil character from Nightmare Before Christmas. And this is just something that she picked up for me randomly one day. Partly because I used to be a really big Nightmare Before Christmas fan when it first came out. And I was buying all kinds of collectibles from it. And way back in the day, they were kind of hard to find. Like, I would buy these Jack Skellington figures from Japan that came in these little coffin cases, and they were really expensive. But then over the years, I kind of got less and less impressed with Tim Burton, and the market kind of got saturated with Nightmare Before Christmas. It kind of became like a thing, and you could get the merchandise everywhere, and I just kind of lost interest in it. But then just in this past year or so, when these Funko Pops came out, they kind of got me excited about Nightmare Before Christmas again. I just thought they were cute and fun, And I was admiring them in the store, and I was like, these guys are really cool, but I really don't want to get into buying Nightmare Before Christmas stuff again. So I was going to leave them on the shelf, but then she picked them up for me and got it for me as a little surprise. So that was kind of cool. And I'm glad she did, because I think this is a really fun looking figure. Even if it wasn't Nightmare Before Christmas, it's just a really cool, interesting little devil character. So that's that. And just for this past Christmas, Vanessa got me this Marvel Legend Archangel figure. So Marvel Legends is one of my most prominent, like, kind of active collections. It's probably the line that I buy the most of these days. And yeah, I spend a lot of money on this line, and this figure here was a deluxe figure, so rather than a standard $30, I think this guy's more like $45, and it's just because he's got these giant wings. Whoops. He's got these giant wings on him, and he also came with some extra accessories, a couple additional heads, and even some extra parts to be used on another figure. And yeah, it wasn't a figure that I was looking forward to spending an extra $45 on, but it was a character that I wanted because it's a really nice figure. And yeah, so that was nice when Vanessa got this for me for Christmas and saved me the trouble of having to buy him myself. Because yeah, he's very cool. So also this past Christmas, Vanessa got me this figure from Pacific Rim Uprising. So this is Shrikethorn, one of the 3 kaijus featured in the sequel. And I know a lot of people didn't care for Pacific Rim Uprising, and the figures here, as you can see, if you're one of the 11,000 people that watched my Pacific Rim video, that review just covered the figures from the first movie, and I didn't get into any of these figures from the second movie. And these figures are made by a different manufacturer, and it's in a whole different category of figure. The ones for the first movie were really detailed. They were hard plastic action figures with lots of articulation, but whereas these are kind of hollow vinyl figures, so they feel like dog toys. They're very lightweight. They have very little articulation. The paint job is kind of sloppy, I would say. It doesn't look like a whole lot of thought went into this. I don't know how screen accurate it is. It seems kind of weird that he's got this red head and then it's orange and blue kind of speckled on him. However, I actually loved Pacific Rim Uprising. I just thought it was a lot of fun, and I really liked all the creature designs. So since the movie didn't do as well at the box office, I was worried they weren't going to get around to making all of the creatures, because they never did finish all the creatures from the first movie. But I was glad that they did, and it's probably because there wasn't as many creatures featured in the second movie. But yeah, so even though this figure isn't up to snuff with the figures from the first movie, I was still really excited to get it. And yeah, I still think he's pretty awesome, even if he is just a dog toy. So there you go. So there's Shrikethorn. Now here's a really cool one that Vanessa got me. I think it was, I can't remember if it was a Christmas or a birthday, but it would have been pretty early on in our relationship. Maybe year 1 or 2 or something like that. But this here, as you can see, is Frankenstein's monster. And this was produced by Mezco. They did a line which was pretty short-lived. I think they only maybe did 3 figures in this line. But it was the Universal Monsters, and this kind of stylized, cartoony look. So you can see he's got really big feet, really big hands, a big head. Like, it almost looks like they're based on a specific animated series or comic or something. But they're really not. They were just original designs. But just a little different from the typical stuff, because I have multiple variations of Frankenstein and the other Universal Monster figures, and I just thought this guy was really cool. Now, he's not superposable. You can see it, his lower half there. He doesn't have any joints on his knees or anything. His feet spin a little bit. But what I really like with these guys is the clothing. So you see his jacket here is cloth. This shirt here as well is real cloth. So it's an interesting choice to mix some soft goods here with the almost statuesque figure, really, because he's not all that posable. His arms do go up and down. Wrists turn, head turns. Anyway, I really love this figure. And yeah, I kind of wish I'd got more of these things when they were readily available. I know they did the creature from the Black Lagoon. And I really can't remember if they got around to anybody else beyond that, but a Wolfman would have been pretty cool because he's always been my favorite Universal monster. But yeah, I do love this Frankenstein. So this was a really cool gift from Vanessa. Now these figures here, this was part of a Christmas present in 2015. So this is a Star Wars Black Series Imperial Forces 4-pack, which was, I believe, an online exclusive. So it was nothing that we could find in stores around here. So yeah, she had to order this one online. And yeah, it might just look like a bunch of standard troopers, but some of these guys are unique characters. So this guy here, for example, he just looks kind of like a TIE fighter pilot, but based on, I guess, the markings on his helmet, this is supposed to represent a character named Lieutenant Oxio or something along those lines. And I think he's either a character from either the novels or a video game or something. So some people that are even more hardcore than me would know who he is. But I just think he's a cool TIE fighter looking pilot. Same as this. This is a Sand Trooper Sergeant. And so he's different from other Sand Troopers just because of the color of his shoulder blade there. Because other Sand Trooper figures have had, I think, black and orange pads. So I guess him with the white pad represents a Sergeant. Then there's also an R2 unit here. So this is basically just a repaint of R2-D2. This guy's name is R2-Q5. And he's pretty cool. I actually don't have a Black Series R2-D2. Partly because when I started collecting Black Series, I kind of made a promise to myself that I wouldn't buy the same standard characters that I already have dozens of times in the 3 3/4 inch format. I was going to restrict myself to aliens and robots and monsters. And so yeah, even though I didn't want another R2-D2, I do love R2 units, and getting this guy in black is actually really cool. I like this guy a lot. So I don't feel as bad about not having an R2 because I have this guy. And the last figure in the pack is the real draw for me. This guy is called a Crimson Stormtrooper. I don't know where he originates from. You've probably seen there's a red Stormtrooper figure coming out for the new movie, Rise of Skywalker. But he's different than this guy. That guy has kind of the newer Stormtrooper design, and he's got these kind of ridges on his costume. This is just a basic Stormtrooper figure painted red. And yeah, so I'm not sure where he comes from, if it's from a particular novel or a comic book or anything, but it's very striking. As soon as I saw this thing, I knew I wanted it. The only way you could get it was in the pack. Now, fortunately, they didn't put him with, another Darth Vader or an Emperor or some other unique character that I wouldn't want to have to get in double. Putting them in a 4-pack of troopers like this is a really cool idea because you could buy this pack 4 or 5 times over. I'm sure some people did just because it's a really cool pack of figures. So this was a really cool gift as well. So thank you, Vanessa, for this one. Vanessa has got me quite a few Transformers over the years. So this here, she got me for my birthday just this past January. So she got me Hound, which is one of the classic Autobots. And she also got me Flywheels, which is kind of a C-list Decepticon. He's not very well known. But these guys are both from Generation 1. And these are from the new Siege line. So the Siege line of Transformers is the line that's currently in stores and what I'm currently collecting. And these guys are from Wave 1. So Siege really just kicked off at the start of 2019. And so yeah, it was pretty cool to start the year off with a couple of these figures because I like both of these guys. Even though I know Hound better as a character, I think these both make for really cool figures. So that was a cool little gift. And this is a figure that just came out. I think it was actually 2018. Vanessa bought it for me this past summer. And this is like a reproduction of the original 1986 Hot Rod figure. So right down to the decals and everything. This is just like the classic Hot Rod. And I'm not really into buying these vintage remakes. They've done a few of them now, but not only are they pretty expensive, but I owned a lot of these figures as a kid. I didn't actually own Hot Rod. But I got rid of most of my vintage Transformers. Partly because the vintage line, even though I loved Transformers, I never felt the toys really lived up to how the characters looked in the cartoons and the comic books. They always were kind of stiff and, they weren't very articulated. So yeah, I do regret getting rid of them, but that's why I did get rid of them. When I was like in my early teens and I was trying to get rid of some stuff, I held on to my G.I. Joes and stuff because I still thought they were great toys. Transformers, I thought they were great characters, but not so much great toys. So I got rid of them. So I'm not really looking to buy all the classic Transformers again. But I don't know what it is, but when I see these guys on shelves now, I do get very nostalgic, and I'm like, I find myself wanting to buy them again, like the vintage Optimus Prime and the vintage Soundwave I've been seeing lately. And yeah, so when I saw this guy on shelf, I was picking him up and I was kind of humming and hawing, saying like, I really shouldn't be buying this stuff, these reproductions of old figures, but he's just really cool. And yeah, when I kind of decided I wasn't going to do it, Vanessa just grabbed him and bought him for me, which was pretty sweet. And I'm glad she did because he's really cool. So there you go. That's Hot Rod. Now for my birthday in 2017, Vanessa got me this Transformer. So this is Six Shot. So he's pretty big. I'm having a hard time getting him all into frame here. But so this guy, again, so he's a modern Transformer. I think he was from, so the line before Siege was called like Power of the Primes or Return of the Titans. I can't remember which line this guy was actually from. They're all essentially the same thing. So anyway, this is a relatively modern figure, but it is based off of a vintage character, and that character was the first guy to have 6 different alt modes, which was a pretty big deal. So he was a pretty deluxe figure back in the day, and he's a pretty badass character. I never had the original toy as a kid, and I didn't know much about him, but I've become a fan of the character just from his appearances in like IDW's comic books and stuff. And it's IDW's comics that really make me want characters that I didn't think I would want before, because they just do a really good job of making these compelling characters and not just seem like silly toys. So anyway, this is a really cool figure. I'm not going to bother transforming him into all of his various modes, but again, this was just another really cool present. Okay, so now I'm going to start getting into the really good stuff. So this was another pretty early present, but this here is Bruticus. So he is a Transformers combiner made up of the various Combaticons. So he was 5 different figures in one, and Vanessa bought me all 5 of them in one shot. It was for a Christmas present several years ago. And yeah, I'm not going to haul them out of my collection. You can see I've kind of got them on the back of the shelf. And this is the earliest combiner they made in what I'll call the modern era. And for that reason, he's a little wobbly. I don't know if I could really take him out of there and have him stand up very well on his own. Some of the later combiners, like Superion there or Defensor, they're a little more solid because they're just made from the past year or so. But yeah, with this version of Bruticus, they hadn't quite perfected it yet. So he's a little wonky, but at the time, I was really stoked to get this guy because it had been a long time since I'd got a combiner. And even though there's kind of a better version of him out now, what I like about having this version is I can have Bruticus on my shelf as well as all the separate components. So you see from the more updated version and stuff, I've got like Brawn and Swindle. Like, so I can have those characters on display individually and still have Bruticus on my shelf. Whereas for like Superion here and Defensor, I either have to choose to have the combined mode on my shelf or the individual characters, which is a pretty tough decision sometimes because sometimes I like the individual characters more, or at least some of them, but you do kind of want the impact of having a big combiner on your shelf. So yeah, it's very cool that Vanessa got me this whole guy, so I keep Bruticus there along with the individual pieces. So here is another Transformer that Vanessa got for me. So this was Christmas 2 years ago, and this is Trypticon. So this is the transforming dinosaur that turns into a city. So he's pretty big. You can see he's sitting up on top of my Transformers shelf. So even compared to, say, Bruticus there, who's already pretty big, and Omega Supreme, Trypticon is quite a bit larger, and I don't really feel like taking him down on that shelf and knocking a bunch of stuff over. But this is just a very cool toy. I was really excited to get him. He's really kind of a signature piece of my toy collection. He really stands out, and when people walk into this room, he's one of the first things they notice. So yeah, there's Trypticon. Now here's one of my favorite pieces that Vanessa got me, and she bought this for my birthday. Again, I can't remember what year exactly. I've had it for maybe 2 or 3 years now. But this is a reproduction of the original 1982 Snake Eyes figure, except he's jumbo sized. So this was made by Gentle Giant. They did the same thing with Star Wars figures. You see here I have a jumbo version of Walrus Man, who's my favorite Star Wars character. And so when it came to Star Wars, Gentle Giant produced the whole vintage line over again in these jumbo figures. But when it came to G.I. Joe, they only got around to releasing, I think, 4 figures before the line was canceled. So it's unfortunate we didn't get some of the later figures, which would have looked really nice in these big, jumbo, upsized figures. But at least I got Snake Eyes. Because Snake Eyes he's like everybody's favorite, and he's the most iconic of all G.I. Joes. And even though I'm kind of dying to open this guy up and play with him, I just love the vintage style packaging, and he looks so great just pinned to the wall like that, especially next to the Walrus Man. So yeah, I really love that figure. So there you go. Now here are a couple of Transformers that Vanessa got me for Christmas in 2016. Now these guys are quite a bit smaller than the other guys I just showed you. But they were probably just as expensive, if not more so, because these are not officially licensed Transformers. These are some of the third-party Transformers I've told you about in some other videos. So it's where these like unlicensed Japanese companies, they make versions of well-known Transformers, but they make them in small numbers and they're all imports. So yeah, they cost quite a bit. So these guys here, they're only about 3 inches tall, and these guys probably range between $60 to $70 a piece. So this guy here, his name is Rod Drill, but if you're a fan of GoBots, which was kind of the other Transforming Robots line of the 80s that kind of lost out on market share to Transformers. So GoBots had a character named Screwhead who looked a lot like this. It's not quite the same, because you'll see here Screwhead had a more it had some texture to this drill on top of his head, and I think he had his face was a little different. But as far as the design and the color scheme goes, this is essentially a nod to Screwhead, but they have to change his name for legal reasons, so he's called Rod Drill. So I can't remember which company it was that made this guy, but he's really cool, and they've gone on to make other homages to GoBot figures, and I do plan on buying more of them. I did recently get their version of Loco, which was the GoBot that turned into a train. So if you're interested in seeing that, you can just go back to maybe just a video or two, and I posted a review of that, but he was really cool. So as cool as Rod Drill here is, this company seems to be getting even better at making these figures, so I'm looking forward to see what else they produce. Now this guy might not look like much, but this is one of my favorite transforming toys in my whole collection. So this toy's name is actually Rear End, which is kind of funny, but it's supposed to be the Transformer known as Tailgate. So with any of these third-party produced figures, they change the name just to keep out of trouble, I guess. So they try and find a name that's somewhat similar. So they took Tailgate and they called him Rear End. But so Tailgate is a vintage Generation 1 Transformer. He was originally a white repaint of Wind Charger. And I had Wind Charger as a kid, but I never had Tailgate, partly because I just saw him as a repaint and it didn't really interest me all that much. But this is one of those characters that IDW put into their comic book and made me absolutely love him. This is, an absolutely fantastic character in the comic book, and he looks really nothing like the vintage toy. They really changed the style of him, so he wouldn't look like just a knockoff of a Wind Charger. And he really came into his own. And as I was reading those IDW comic books, I really want toys of all those characters. And like Six Shot there, it's nice when Hasbro makes a figure of those characters, but sometimes what Hasbro produces just isn't as good as I would hope. For example, Hasbro actually did produce a version of a tailgate here based on his IDW look. But this is what they gave us. And it just leaves a lot to be desired. He's got kind of a lot of kibble hanging off of him. His arms are so... It's just kind of cheap. And mind you, it was cheap. Like, this figure probably only cost me about $12 as opposed to the, $60 that this guy would cost Vanessa to buy. But it's money well spent. This thing here doesn't do it for me. This thing here looks like it leapt right off of the page. It looks just like the artwork. In all the proportions. It's got an expressive face, even though it is just basically a faceless figure. I can see the personality in this thing. And I absolutely love it. I think it's, of all the Transformer toys I have, it's the one that best captures the character of how they appeared in that particular media. So, like, I have some toys that are kind of based more on cartoon looks or more based on the comic book looks, but this one here is the one I have that best captures it, and I absolutely love it. So this is one of the coolest things I think Vanessa has ever gotten me. So this here is Rear End. Now here are the G.I. Joes that Vanessa has got me over the years. So I believe she got me maybe this guy in 2012 and these guys in 2013. So I'm going to start with these two. So the 2012 G.I. Joe convention had a box set that contained the October Guard versus the Iron Grenadiers. And that was the first year that I shelled out the money to buy the convention box set, which includes 15 exclusive figures, and this thing costs like $500. It was me taking a big plunge into a new level of toy collecting. I'd always collected toys, but I hadn't really put in the big money to buy these like limited edition collector sets. And I'd kind of thought about it in the past, but yeah, 2012 was the year I finally bit the bullet and bought the G.I. Joe convention set, which was great. And I reviewed that set for you in a separate video if you want to go check that out. I posted that maybe a month or so ago. Anyway, with that set, when you go to these conventions, they always release a couple other exclusive figures that are only released at the show. So non-attendees like myself can't order them in advance. And the only way for me to get them is for people that go to the show to buy them and then sell them on the secondary market. So you're destined to pay big bucks for these things, especially for characters that are going to be in high demand. And Darklon here fit the bill. Now, he might look like a pretty weird character. Red pants, green sweater, Darth Vader mask. But this guy is Destro's cousin. He's a character from the vintage line. They never made any other versions of him in the modern line until several years later. So when this figure came out in 2012, if you wanted Darklon, you had to go after this convention set figure. And I really like this figure, and I like this character, and I really wanted this figure, but after spending like $500 on the set, it was really hard to justify spending, it was like $100, maybe a little bit more than that, for just this one G.I. Joe figure. Very hard to justify. And then also that year, as they do every year, they put out a Trooper, and they put out a 3-pack. So that year, it was the Iron Grenadier Trooper, the Annihilators. So you can get 3 identical figures in one pack. And most people were selling those online for, say, $150 for all 3. And if they broke it up, then they'd sell the individual figure for, say, $60 to $70. So even though, sure, it would have been cool to have 3, because the Annihilators are a cool-looking character, since they were all identical, I was fine at this price point to just get 1. So I let Vanessa know these were 2 of the things that I was looking for. I didn't really expect her to go for Darklon. I thought I would maybe get an Annihilator. But she got me both, which was awesome. Because I'm not sure what these figures go for now, but the Darklon figure went up in value quite a bit pretty soon after she got it for me. So I don't think he's going to go down in value anytime soon. So that was a really cool gift. I was super excited to get these 2 guys from her. Now I'll push those guys aside for a second, and I'll talk about this guy, because this is actually one of my favorite toys in my whole collection. I really love this thing. So you see his name there is Steel Cobra, And he was from the 2011 G.I. Joe convention set. And the theme of that set was Mission Brazil. And I did not get that set. That set now, which was sold for probably around $400 or something in 2011, now it's online for over $1,000, and every figure in that 15-figure box set sells for like $100 a piece. Some of them more than that. I'm not sure what he would run you nowadays, but I'm gonna guess you're probably gonna pay close to $200 for this figure. And so what this is, so it's a Snake Eyes head that's painted in chrome, put on Flash's body. So Flash is the G.I. Joe laser trooper. And in Brazil, back in the old days, what they did is they took some of the classic G.I. Joe characters from the 80s and they repainted them and created new characters. They did that in a few of the other countries. And so in Brazil, what they did is they took a vintage Snake Eyes head, put it on a vintage Flash body, and created this new character who was a Cobra character called Cobra Diaco. And he was only available in Brazil. And, when I was a kid, I had no idea that existed. It wasn't until I was older and I was collecting G.I. Joes again and went on the internet and found out about these foreign-made characters. And collectors went nuts for these things because they're really cool looking. We had no idea they existed. And they were made in smaller numbers. Some of them were made from cheaper plastic, and so a lot of them were damaged. So a vintage Cobra Diaco from Brazil was a very highly sought-after collectible. And I just loved the look of him. I know he's just two other characters mashed together and repainted, but it just worked really well. And but to get a vintage Cobra Diaco was way out of my price range. So yeah, then when the Collectors Club released their 2011 box set of Mission Brazil, they did a modern update of Cobra Diaco. They gave him a more Americanized name there, call him Steel Cobra, and they took the modern era Flash body and Snake Eyes heads. Those were figures from 2007. Mashed them together, painted them up to look like the vintage Brazilian Cobra Diaco figure, and here you go. So not quite as collectible as the vintage one, but sure enough, he was made in limited numbers. He was only available in the convention set, so it became a very collectible figure. And for me, especially just because I love this character, I knew I would never get the vintage one, so I really wanted this. But this figure came out the year before the 2012 convention set, so I hadn't really got around to spending those big dollars on figures yet. I was still mostly buying stuff at retail. And so this guy was kind of a wish list, bucket list figure, if you will. And yeah, Vanessa got this guy for me for Christmas, and I absolutely love it. So not just because I think he's so cool and unique, I love that it's based on this weird foreign repaint. I love the look of him, and I love that Vanessa got it for me, and it was really kind of the first big action figure purchase, so I've got some sentimental value there for him as well. Now this is more of just a side note. I'm going to show you another figure here. This was not a gift from Vanessa, but because I've been so intrigued by this character of Cobra Diaco ever since I first learned about him back in the early 2000s, like I said, I never thought I would get a vintage one, but I recently got a reproduction of what the vintage Cobra Diaco would have looked like. And the person that was selling him online said they were including a bonus head so you could create a Cobra pilot character, which I wasn't interested in. I was like, yeah, sure, give me the extra head, whatever. So here he is. So this is a vintage Flash body, but that is the Cobra pilot head on it. I also have this chrome Snake Eyes head, so that's the vintage Snake Eyes head. If this head was on that body, that would look just like the Cobra Diaco figure that was released in Brazil back in the 80s. Unfortunately, the guy sent it to me with this head attached to it, and I cannot get that screw out of the back of him for the life of me. I tried really hard and tried to avoid stripping it, but it is in there good, and I don't want to do any more damage. So it kind of kills me because I paid a bit of money for this, and I was really dying to display a vintage Cobra Diaco reproduction next to the modern version, but I can't do that yet until I figure out a way to get that head off and get this head in there. So if any of you guys have any Any secrets or suggestions, please let me know, because I'd really like to get this guy on the shelf with him. So the final figures that I have to show you that Vanessa got me are 3 of the more valuable figures in my collection, and that's because they are all Hot Toys. So Hot Toys is a company that makes high-end 12-inch figures. I think they're based out of Japan. And lots of companies make 12-inch action figures with cloth clothing, but only Hot Toys makes them of this quality. These things are insane. And they run about $200 when they're first released, and generally they typically just seem to go up in value. And I've had a hard time shelling out $200 for an action figure, especially even though you think you get more bang for your buck with these 12-inch figures. I don't mind as much spending $100 on a little G.I. Joe, partly because G.I. Joe is kind of my biggest passion. I have a whole collection of them, shelves full of them, as you can see behind there. But I don't typically collect 12-inch dolls. I don't have a whole lot of them. But these figures are just so nice. Part of the problem is I'd be worried that if I start buying too many of them, I would get hooked, and then my toy collecting hobby would get even more expensive than it already is. So I kind of view these as really unique, high-end items, and not something that I would buy for myself on the regular at all. I have, I think, 6 Hot Toys in my collection. Besides the one you see here, I also have Tonto from the Lone Ranger, and I have a Heath Ledger Joker, and I have the Rocketeer. So those were figures I bought for myself. But these ones here, Vanessa bought me each of them. So she got me the Crow, and so this is from my all-time favorite movie, Brandon Lee playing Eric Draven, the Crow. So this was a Christmas present in 2013, I believe. Then she got me Snake Eyes from G.I. Joe Retaliation in 2014, and and Storm Shadow from Retaliation in 2017, I believe. Anyway, it's hard for me to show these guys off and do them justice, but I'll whip around them a little bit here. So you can see the detail in like all of their little accessories, like the strings on his guitar. He's got the little wedding ring around his neck. But what really impresses me is the sculpting in these guys' faces, like the shine in their eyes, and where he wears makeup on his face. You can kind of see like the pores in his skin. The detail is just is crazy with these things. And Storm Shadow as well. So he's got an alternate head with a masked head, which looks really cool, and most people associate Storm Shadow with his mask on. But the likeness to the actor is just so well done that I feel that's the most impressive thing to show off with this figure, so I choose to display him unmasked. But you see his like metal accessories there, his sneakers, all the detail in his weapons here. He's got another sai stored on the back here. He's got room for his swords to be sheathed. The tails on his jacket here. Just really great stuff. Snake Eyes. Again, metal sword with the Arashikage logo on it. His layered armor. Even his face. It's hard to see the detail here, but he's got various textures on his helmet. And like the piece over his mouth, it's like a separate, it's kind of like a see-through piece. And yeah, I know it's really not picking up here on the camera, but it's really cool. Again, loads of detail here on the back. Loads of different textures. Again, this sword, I believe, has the black metal blade. Yeah, so that's really cool too. Anyway, I love these things. And I think Vanessa would probably buy me even more. You know, when Christmases and birthdays roll around, she asks me, is there any other Hot Toys I'm looking for? But like I said, these guys are really signature pieces in my collection. I have them in a glass display case, and I like to be able to show them off. And if I had 30 of them, I feel they would just kind of lose their impact. So just having a few key characters really makes them stand out. And these three here are all just awesome. Okay, so those are the majority, at least the coolest stuff that Vanessa has gotten for me over the years. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, please like below and leave me a comment and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, thanks so much for watching. I should be back pretty soon with kind of a more standard episode, and I'll show you all the new stuff that I've got. So as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for getting me up to those 170 subscribers and those almost 19,000 views. It's all very much appreciated. The whole reason I do this is just so I can share my passion of toys with other people, because I don't have a whole lot of people in my circle of friends and stuff that are into this stuff. So yeah, it means a lot when you guys kind of when you watch and you engage me in conversations in the comments and all that stuff. Yeah, it's really cool. So thank you so much, and I will see you next time.